Marilyn Monroe was used to facing down Hollywood's biggest monsters, but nothing prepared her for the moment she had to physically shield a gravely ill child from the most brutal paparazzi attack of the 1950s. She delivered a 12-word threat that risked her entire career, proving that the most desired woman in the world was also the most fiercely protective mother figure a little girl ever needed. The noise of the studio could never touch the quiet despair in her heart. She was the most desired woman in the world, yet, when she looked in the mirror, Marilyn only saw a reflection longing for a kindness the spotlight would never offer. What she truly craved wasn't another film role or magazine cover, but a single, pure, unscripted moment of human connection. The endless performance was exhausting. She wanted to find the quiet, authentic person she felt was trapped beneath the glamour. It was 1955, and the world outside Marilyn's Brentwood home was a beautiful, chaotic whirlwind of flashbulbs and demanding agents. Inside, shielded by layers of security and velvet drapes, she often felt unbearably alone. The whispers that followed her, the cruel, shallow judgments, had created a thick, suffocating shield between Norma Jean and the global phenomenon known as Marilyn Monroe. She had achieved everything the world said mattered, and yet the achievement felt hollow. Every smile she sold to the public felt like a debt she was paying against her own soul. Then the note arrived. It wasn't from a studio head, a foreign dignitary, or another suitor. It was written in the careful, slightly shaky cursive of a worried mother, relayed through a trusted contact who understood that Marilyn had a weakness for genuine need. The note spoke of Lily. Lily was a 10-year-old girl in California whose story was one of profound bravery. For 3 years, a relentless illness had been chipping away at her strength, making every single day a hard-fought victory. The doctors, in their hushed, clinical voices, had recently delivered the kind of news no parent should ever have to hear. The battle was ending soon. Her final wish, submitted to a foundation that helps grant dreams, wasn't for a spectacular trip or a meeting with a war hero. It was agonizingly simple. Lily wanted a picnic with Marilyn Monroe. She simply wanted to share a quiet hour with the one person in the world who seemed to carry a burden as heavy as her own. Marilyn read the words again, tears pricking her eyes. The letter explained that Lily found comfort not in the glamorous image of the star, but in the vulnerability she saw in Marilyn's movie characters. Lily believed Marilyn would understand what it felt like to be underestimated, to be fragile in a harsh, bright world. The location Lily chose was specific: the Japanese tea garden within the Golden Gate Park. It was tucked away, known for its hushed stone paths and ancient trees, a place of profound peace. Lily's mother, Martha, explained that the one thing Lily couldn't bear was pity, and the one thing she desperately needed was normality. A few hours where she wasn't treated as a patient, but simply as a child enjoying a summer day with a friend. For Marilyn, the request was a powerful, impossible magnet. Her people argued against it. The risks were immense. The secrecy required was unthinkable. If the location was discovered, the media frenzy would crush the delicate moment and endanger Lily. Her manager warned that a public failure could cost her the most lucrative contract of her career. Yet, when Marilyn looked at the picture of Lily, a tiny girl with enormous knowing eyes and a gentle smile, she saw a reflection of her own unacknowledged spirit. Marilyn knew she had to go. This wasn't a public relations opportunity, this was a pilgrimage. She made a commitment, promising Martha that she would get there no matter the cost. Arrangements were made under cover of absolute secrecy, a deception worthy of a spy thriller, all for a simple, quiet picnic. But when fame is your shadow, true darkness can be the only place where secrets stay hidden. As Marilyn prepared to slip away into the morning fog, she had a terrible sinking feeling that the quiet peace she sought might be the very thing she was about to sacrifice. The morning fog was their accomplice, a soft gray curtain drawn across the city designed to hide the impossible fact. Marilyn Monroe was, for a few precious hours, entirely on her own. She wore a simple, oversized trench coat, a thick scarf pulled high over her iconic blonde curls, and dark sunglasses. The ultimate costume for a star attempting to disappear. The effort to reach the Japanese tea garden felt less like a commute and more like an elaborate escape. Her usual black limousine was nowhere in sight. Instead, a discreetly borrowed Ford sedan driven by a single trusted studio assistant weaved through the back streets. Every red light was a moment of gripping anxiety. Marilyn had lied to her agents, evaded her security detail, and risked massive public relations fallout, all to honor a child's simple wish. Marilyn, usually the epitome of relaxation under pressure, gripped the handle of the picnic basket. It contained not champagne and caviar, but simple peanut butter and jelly sandwiches cut into perfect triangles. The car finally idled near the secluded east entrance. The assistant gave a nervous glance backward, a silent plea for Marilyn to be quick, to be safe. But Marilyn simply smiled, a deep, genuine smile. For once, the risk felt worth the possibility of reward. Stepping out of the car and into the cool, silent air of the garden, she shed the weight of fame. She was just a woman carrying a basket, ready to meet a friend. Martha was waiting near the stone lantern, her face a roadmap of worry and tenacious hope. Beside her, situated beneath a twisting pine tree, was Lily. Seeing her in person was a profound experience. Lily was so tiny, sitting in her lightweight modern wheelchair, bundled in a warm sweater. Yet, her small, sharp face held an extraordinary light. Her eyes, magnified by her thinness, were the deepest, most thoughtful shade of brown Marilyn had ever seen. She looked like a miniature warrior, beautiful and fiercely fragile. The introduction was quick, respectful, and tearless. Martha knew this was Lily's time. She retreated a polite distance, giving them the privacy they had risked everything for. Marilyn knelt beside the wheelchair, bringing herself eye level with the girl. "Hello, Lily," she whispered, her famous voice softened to a warm murmur. "I hear you make very important wishes." Lily giggled, a surprisingly bright sound. "You came," she said, her voice small but clear. "Mama said maybe you were too busy." "I canceled everything," Marilyn confessed, taking off her sunglasses and letting Lily see the genuine warmth in her eyes. "This is the most important thing I have to do today." They spent the next hour in a bubble of perfect, ordinary joy. Marilyn talked about her dog, Hugo, and Lily talked about her favorite stuffed rabbit, Mr. Floppy. They shared the peanut butter sandwiches, which Marilyn declared the best food she'd ever tasted, and Lily showed Marilyn her most prized possession, a tiny, smooth, perfectly round river stone. The star power, the glamour, the drama, it all simply melted away. Lily didn't see Marilyn Monroe. She saw Norma Jean, a woman who truly listened. Marilyn, in turn, saw a fiercely brave soul who, despite her hardship, radiated a gentle, uncompromising spirit. The piece was complete, a fragile, beautiful gift of shared time. The contrast between this quiet, pure moment and the shrieking chaos of her everyday life was staggering. But true solitude is rarely granted to the iconic, and even the thickest fog cannot hold back the sharp focus of a jealous, watchful eye. Just as Marilyn reached for the thermos to pour them a cup of tea, she caught a split-second glint high up on the hill overlooking the garden. A fleeting, almost invisible flash that cut through the soft morning light and vanished. It was the color of highly polished glass, and it hung there, malevolent and still, an intrusion that signaled their precious time of quiet might be violently ending. The piece was a lie, a beautiful, delicate facade instantly shattered by the silent scream of a perfect chrome lens. Marilyn paused, the movement of her hand pouring tea suspended in the cool air, her heart suddenly pounding a frantic tattoo against her ribs. She knew that glint. She recognized the cold, ruthless signature of a professional photographer who had found their impossible prize. She forced her expression to remain calm, continuing to smile at Lily as she poured the tea, but her mind was racing through scenarios, each one ending in disaster. The glint was followed by a faint clicking sound, barely audible over the trickle of the nearby fountain. Yet to Marilyn's hypersensitive ears, it sounded like a volley of distant gunfire. They had been found. Their secret, sacred moment was no longer their own. "Tell me about Mr. Floppy, darling," Marilyn murmured, gently resting her hand on Lily's small shoulder, instinctively trying to shield the girl's tiny frame from the distant lens. Lily, unaware of the intrusion, lifted the stuffed rabbit and began to describe his adventures, her voice growing animated. This was the moment Marilyn had risked everything for, the unvarnished happiness of a child. She had to protect it, now more than ever. Marilyn's eyes scanned the perimeter of the garden. The original camera was high and far away, the work of a lone sniper, but it was only a matter of minutes, seconds perhaps, before the information was relayed. The true horde, the ravenous pack, would descend upon them. She looked at Martha, who was standing further back, and gave a sharp, subtle shake of her head. "Don't panic." Martha, whose every nerve was already frayed from years of watching her daughter suffer, nodded, her face grim. She understood the unspoken code of the famous. Once they are spotted, the rulebook is tossed out. Marilyn used her body, the famous angles and curves the press coveted so much, as a tactical shield. She positioned herself slightly in front of Lily's wheelchair, turning her back to the direction of the lens. She engaged Lily completely, telling a humorous, exaggerated story about a clumsy wardrobe malfunction on the set of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. She made Lily laugh so hard the child briefly forgot her pain, forgot her illness, forgot everything but the beautiful woman telling the ridiculous tale. Every word, every theatrical gesture was designed to draw the attention of the distant camera solely onto herself. She was performing not for the millions, but for the one. She was sacrificing her own privacy, offering herself up to the intrusion, hoping to buy the girl a few more minutes of peace. She felt the familiar, cold weight of the world's judgment pressing down, but this time, it was a pressure she could repurpose. Suddenly, a louder, closer sound erupted. It wasn't a click. It was the crunch of gravel and the heavy sound of running footsteps. The lead photographer hadn't waited for backup. He burst through a side hedge, a hulking presence with a camera slung over his shoulder like a weapon, his face tight with greed. He had the prize in sight. The legendary Marilyn Monroe, alone, vulnerable, and kneeling beside a wheelchair-bound child. The violation was immediate and absolute. Lily's eyes, fixed on Marilyn, suddenly widened, not at the sight of the man, but at the look of absolute shock and horror that flickered across Marilyn's face. The game was over. The tranquility of the garden was about to be violently replaced by a storm of greed and chaos. The gravel spat beneath the shoes of the first reporter like tiny, spiteful explosions, shattering the silence and announcing the violent end of Lily's wish. The air instantly tasted of ozone from the camera flashes. It was not just an intrusion, it was an assault. A sudden, brutal rush of noise, flashes, and adrenaline that struck the quiet scene with the force of a tidal wave. Marilyn leaped to her feet, instinctively positioning herself between the man and the wheelchair. "Stop!" she commanded, her voice surprisingly strong, but her demand was useless. The first photographer, Frank, a man Marilyn recognized as a particular menace, ignored her completely. His eyes were fixed on Lily, the heartbreaking contrast of the world's most desired woman tending to a tiny, frail child, the perfect $1,000,000 tragedy shot. He lifted his camera and unleashed a strobe of blinding light. Flash, flash, flash. Lily gasped, her small body recoiling in the wheelchair. The aggressive, sudden light was a physical shock to her sensitive system. Her little hands flew up to cover her eyes, but the pain wasn't just physical. It was the pain of disappointment, the abrupt realization that her perfect moment had been ruined. A low, whimpering cry escaped her. The initial chaos was quickly compounded. Within 90 seconds, 24 more photographers and reporters arrived, swarming through the path, microphones held like bayonets, shouting questions. "Who is the girl? Is she your daughter, Marilyn? What's her illness?" The noise was deafening, the air thick with the smell of cheap camera batteries and frantic desperation. Lily, already struggling to breathe easily, began to tremble violently. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin a translucent white. Martha, Lily's mother, rushed forward, tears streaming down her face, trying to push the growing circle back. "Please, she is very ill. You're scaring her," she pleaded, but her quiet voice was swallowed by the roar of the press pack. Frank sneered, shouting over the noise, "This suffering little doll is selling my picture. Get out of the way, lady." The cruelty of the press was a palpable, violent force. Marilyn felt a cold, furious heat rising inside her. This wasn't professional behavior. It was cruelty. They were actively causing distress to a child whose life was already short and difficult. It was in that moment, seeing the tiny shaking shoulders of Lily, that Marilyn Monroe's famous composure cracked, revealing the fiery, protective strength of Norma Jean. She was no longer a star performing. She was a fierce human shield. She felt the overwhelming urge to burn down the entire media circus to protect this one small light. She turned her body fully to the press, her famous face alight with powerful, unmistakable anger. She spread her arms wide, physically creating a barrier against the aggression. All that mattered was the small, fragile life behind her. Lily, clinging to her mother, looked up at Marilyn with wide, frightened eyes, and in that gaze, Marilyn saw her own childhood vulnerability reflected back. The line had been crossed. The press had forfeited any right to humanity. And in that moment, Marilyn knew the time for pleas was over. It was time for a fight. The final, unforgivable act came in a blinding, aggressive burst. A photographer pushed his lens right over Marilyn's shoulder, firing a flash that was inches from Lily's face, causing the little girl to let out a strangled, terrible sound of pure panic and distress. It was not a famous star that reacted, but a furious, protective animal. Marilyn's entire body tensed. The soft vulnerability the world adored vanished, replaced by a searing, instantaneous rage. She didn't shout. She didn't weep. Instead, she took one decisive step forward and pushed the heavy camera away from Lily's face with a swift, powerful movement of her forearm. The professional camera clattered against the stone path, silenced. The photographer stared at her, stunned. They were used to her sweetness. They were not prepared for the steel in her eyes. "Get out!" she hissed, the word cutting through the noise like broken glass. "Every single one of you, get out of this park. Now!" The sheer force of her genuine anger, so raw and unscripted, momentarily froze the mob. They had come for the glamorous victim, not this imposing, defiant woman. She ignored the microphones being thrust into her space. All of her focus was laser-locked on the journalists who had caused Lily such visible distress. She pointed directly at the man who had fired the flash in Lily's face. You have no honor. You have no decency. This child is fighting for her life, and you chose to frighten her for a caption." Her voice was low and shaking, not with fear, but with controlled fury. "You are not journalists. You are vultures. You are stealing the final hours of a child's existence." The words resonated because they were true. Even the hardened reporters felt a momentary sting of shame. Lily's mother, Martha, stood behind Marilyn, holding her daughter close, tears silently pouring down her face. But they were tears of immense, profound relief. She watched this woman risk her image and her career to stand up to the monsters on her daughter's behalf. Marilyn knelt down beside Lily again, turning her back on the press to offer comfort, daring the photographers to take a picture of her in such a vulnerable, tender position. She gently stroked Lily's hair, whispering a promise that the scary men would soon be gone. The contrast, the roaring chaos just feet away, and the tender, fierce intimacy of her touch was almost unbearable to witness. The moment was a profound reckoning for Marilyn. She realized that her fame had a true purpose beyond selling tickets. She could use it as armor. She stood up slowly, facing the barrage of lenses one last time, her expression a mask of absolute, unshakable resolve. She had shielded Lily with her body. Now she would shield her with her celebrity. The fight was not over. It was just beginning. Marilyn did the unthinkable. She turned her famous, universally adored face directly into the blinding light of the cameras, daring them to continue their brutal circus. She positioned herself like a guardian angel, kneeling again, placing her entire body between the vulnerable child and the predatory lenses. This was not the playful, flirty posing. This was raw, unrehearsed defiance. She looked not at the lens, but at the men behind them, her eyes wide with a burning conviction. It was a silent challenge. "Go ahead, take your picture, but you will have to shoot me first." One of the reporters pushed a microphone almost to her lips. "Mrs. Monroe, is this a publicity stunt? Is this child related to you?" She didn't dodge the question. She met his gaze with absolute intensity. "This is not a stunt," she stated clearly. "This is a quiet act of kindness, brutally invaded by men without consciences." "You ask if she is related to me? She is related to me through humanity, something you have forgotten exists." She stood up quickly, towering over the kneeling child, but still blocking the crucial angle. Then she used her most powerful weapon, her fame, against the very people who profited from it. "Look at her," Marilyn challenged. "Is this worth your front page? A picture of a child whose life is being shortened by fear? Is this the story you want to tell your children? That you chased down a suffering little girl just to sell 35 cents worth of newspaper?" The silence that followed was shocking. The photographers hesitated. Marilyn had neutralized their weapon by exposing their moral bankruptcy. But greed is a powerful addiction. Frank, the most aggressive photographer, decided to press the attack. He took a heavy step toward the wheelchair. Marilyn moved faster. She reached out, not to push him, but to grab the collar of his shirt with surprising strength, stopping him dead. She physically braced her shoulder against his. She refused to yield the space. She leaned in close enough so only he could hear, lowering her voice to a dangerous, compelling whisper. The world tilted on the axis of that whispered confrontation. Marilyn's hand now gripped the fabric of Frank's shirt. Frank, the man behind the lens, met her gaze with apprehension. She delivered her promise, her voice clear and low, weighted with total certainty. If you print this photo, you will never photograph me or anyone I know ever again. 12 words. It was a promise to blacklist him, a career-ending sentence. She was telling him he would be completely cut off from the light, banished to the professional darkness. The silence of the other reporters was the sound of them calculating the potential cost of her wrath. Frank's face went slack with paralyzing fear. He could sell this single picture for thousands of dollars, but he would suffer forever in a drought of assignments. Slowly, Frank let his lens drop toward the ground. He had lost the confrontation, but he was not yet defeated. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a disposable camera, quickly snapping 2 pictures of Marilyn's face, now contorted with exhaustion and rage. "We'll see about never," he spat, a clear, silent threat. Marilyn's expression didn't change. She knew the threat was real, but the crucial angle of the child was protected. She spoke to them now, not with anger, but with a plea. "You see a story. I saw a child who only wanted 1 hour of peace. She has suffered enough. Her family has suffered enough. I'm asking you, for the first and last time, to show decency." She paused. "Let this be the story you don't print." The tension dissipated. One by one, the reporters began to back away, stumbling over their tripods. Lily, still hidden, began to relax her grip on her mother. The enemy was gone, but the damage had been done, and one desperate man still held a weapon. Marilyn knelt quickly beside Lily, her own composure finally trembling from the adrenaline and the immense risk she had just taken. The silence that descended upon the Japanese tea garden was vast and profound, a fragile, trembling quiet. It was the silence of relief. Marilyn's trench coat was disheveled, but her eyes, fixed entirely on Lily, were steady. She went straight to the wheelchair, gently touching Lily's pale cheek. "It's over, darling," Marilyn whispered. "They are gone. I am so sorry, so terribly sorry that they ruined our tea party." Lily opened her eyes. They were wide and wet, not with tears of fear, but of profound exhaustion. She managed a weak, heartbreaking little smile. "You were brave, Marilyn," she murmured, "like a knight." That simple compliment caused the immense wall of adrenaline she had built to finally crumble. She knew they couldn't stay a second longer. With Martha's immediate quiet help, Marilyn began the delicate process of moving Lily. Lily was too fragile to sit upright for the jostling journey. Marilyn didn't hesitate. She carefully, tenderly lifted the 10-year-old girl into her arms. Lily was almost weightless, and Marilyn cradled her close, tucking the child's head against her shoulder. Holding Lily felt different from holding any prop. It was a fierce, protective connection that grounded her completely. For those few steps, Marilyn Monroe was not a symbol. She was a protector, a warm haven for a suffering little soul. Martha led the way, glancing nervously back down the path. They reached the waiting car, not the assistant's sedan, but a larger vehicle sent by security. Marilyn settled Lily gently across the back seat. Lily immediately fell into a deep, necessary sleep. Marilyn held her breath, listening to the shallow, steady cadence of the child's breathing, unwilling to break the perfect quiet. Before closing the door, Marilyn looked at Martha. "You saved her peace," Martha managed to whisper. "You risked everything for my daughter's dignity." Marilyn shook her head. "She taught me what dignity is," she replied. "I should have known better than to believe I could outrun my own shadow. But I promise you, Martha, this is not the end. The gentleman who came here today will not go unpunished, and Lily will have all the peace I can possibly buy for her." The car pulled away. Marilyn kept her promise with the kind of fierce, quiet devotion that defined her life away from the cameras. The story of the picnic never broke. Not one single picture of Lily was ever published, a silent testament to the power of Marilyn's 12-word ultimatum. Frank's low-quality, secretly taken pictures of Marilyn's furious face were buried by a swift, quiet legal cleanup, preventing any connection to Lily from surfacing. For the next few months, Marilyn created a bubble of protection around Lily and Martha. She anonymously arranged for Lily to receive the best possible medical attention in a private, sunlit wing of a Los Angeles hospital. She secured a constant, dedicated nursing team, all paid for by an untraceable trust fund she immediately established. But her most important contribution was her presence. Marilyn visited Lily often, slipping past security late in the evening. She would sit beside Lily's bed, not as a star, but as Norma Jean, simply reading aloud. She would meticulously adjust Lily's pillows, or hum a quiet, off-key tune, a simple, gentle presence that chased away the fear. Lily's condition grew increasingly fragile, yet her spirit remained untarnished. On the days Lily was too weak to talk, she would simply hold Marilyn's hand, drawing strength from the steady, warm connection. Marilyn, in turn, found a profound, simple purpose in these quiet rooms. The nurses and Martha watched this deep, unexpected bond blossom with awe. Marilyn never treated Lily as a tragic figure, but as an equal, a little woman with a magnificent imagination. Then, one cold morning, 4 months after the picnic, Marilyn received a small, sealed envelope. Inside was a simple card and a perfectly smooth, round riverstone. The card was from Martha. Marilyn sat down heavily. She knew what the card meant. She opened it, her hands trembling, and read the carefully written lines that confirmed the inevitable yet still shocking news. The deepest, most tear-jerking payoff came in the postscript. Martha had written, "Lily passed peacefully this morning. She was holding the stone. Her very last words were a question she asked me in a whisper. Mama, do you think Marilyn will remember me for my bravery or just for my small size?" The sentence broke Marilyn completely. She pressed the card to her chest, sobbing with the quiet, profound sorrow of losing a true friend. Lily hadn't used her final breath to ask for comfort. She had used it to ask if her inner self had been seen. She would never forget. Marilyn held the riverstone, a tangible reminder of the day she became a human shield for a tiny, brave knight. The public would never know about this hidden act of grace, but it was the most heroic thing Marilyn Monroe would ever do. The next morning, Marilyn quietly set in motion the final, lasting promise she had made to the brave little girl. Lily was gone, but the echo of her tiny, brave voice resonated within Marilyn for the rest of her life. She never spoke of Lily publicly, but the effect of that confrontation fundamentally changed her. After Lily, she faced the world with a new, quiet steel. She made one final, lasting gesture in Lily's honor, a gesture so anonymous that it remained unknown for decades. Using a shell corporation, Marilyn quietly funded the construction of a beautiful, sun-drenched pediatric wing at a California children's hospital. It was specifically designed with secluded, quiet gardens. It was a peaceful, outdoor space built to honor the memory of the simple tea party that was stolen from them. The wing's dedication plaque bore no name, only a phrase suggested by Martha. Dedicated to all the brave, quiet souls who just want a moment to share a sandwich in the sun. We live in a world obsessed with the surface, but the story of Marilyn and Lily reminds us that the most significant acts of courage often occur in the quiet shadows. It challenges the very definition of fame and success, replacing applause with purpose. Marilyn Monroe chose the moral high ground, using her colossal fame to defend a 10-year-old's right to obscurity. She made the heroic choice to protect the quiet integrity of a private moment. Lily came to the picnic hoping to meet a star. Marilyn left the park knowing she had met a hero. The little girl who asked if Marilyn would remember her bravery taught the world's biggest icon that true worth is not found in the blinding light of fame, but in the profound, unwavering love one shows for those who need it most. And that, my friends, is a story that will never truly fade. If this story reminded you that true courage happens when the cameras are off, hit that like button right now. And for more untold emotional stories about the legendary people behind the spotlight, make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell, because sometimes the most important heroes are the ones we never expected.